It's rumored or reported that J. Edgar Hoover was instrumental in your arrest. Is there any truth in that?
Is there any truth in that? You would better ask Mr. Hoover.
You have no grudges?
Grudges? With whom?
Grudges against J. Edgar Hoover.
Well, I never did have.
The depression of the 30s, well, no man alive. People did most anything just to survive. Here's a story about a man that made his fortune and fame. A robbing desperado, Alvin Karpis by name. Al combined with Freddie Barker and his ma, terrorizing folks right through to St. Paul. Robbing banks, payrolls, kidnappings and all. Alvin Karpis never did things small. As time wore on, all his pals got led. Nelson, Dillinger, Ziegler, and Fred. In early 36, Hoover's boys moved in. Then Karpis took the rap for the snatch of hand. They gave him life, sent him to the rock, but he kept his will, couldn't make him talk. Robbing banks, payrolls, kidnappings, and all. Alvin Karpis never did things small. To catch their man, creepy Karpis always on the lam. A slick, smooth son of a gun, public enemy #1. Alcatraz couldn't break him, finally walked away free. Now he's on the outside like you and me. He lived fast and hard without a regret, paid his dues for the kind of life that he led. Had to do what he did, the chips fell that way. He's living proof that crime don't pay. Robbing banks, payrolls, kidnappings and all. Alvin Karpis never did things small.
How much money could you expect from a little town in Kansas or a fair-sized town?
It all depends, like say Concordia, for instance. We made it a point to take those kind of towns during the wheat harvest when the banks had to have a lot of money to pay the farmers and one thing, you know, their checks, cashing their checks for the sale of their wheat and so forth. So you might go in a town like that in that time of the year and get maybe $50,000 or $60,000 in cash, or in the winter if you got 10,000 out of that same bank, it would be remarkable.
How many men would you usually have with you? What kind of arms did you carry?
Well, usually machine guns and .45 automatics.
But you knew you were going to be doing some shooting. You were ready to shoot.
Well, we didn't know we were going. We was hoping we didn't, but if we had to, we wanted to be sure that we had the firepower that they didn't have.
And anybody got in the way would be killed or wounded?
Well, you say
including you.
It all depended. It all depended. No, there was many a time where we would have, under our viewpoint, been justified in shooting, but that was always one of the big squabbles after one of them.
Tell me about Concordia, because I read that was just the greatest foul.
Well, it was. We went in that place, and to begin with, there were two farmers sitting on a bench eating their lunch, talking, and we finally, after we got everybody under control, we had to stop them and tell them the bank was being robbed. But the man that we had depended on to open the vault, the safe, he wasn't there. And the other fellow that could have opened it, he just flatly refused. So we tried to persuade him.
You really used some pretty heavy-handed methods persuading him, didn't you?
Yes, he was pretty well worked over.
Was that the one where you put the gun up against the girl's stomach and said, I'm going to pull the trigger?
I brought a beautiful-looking little girl, an employee. Yeah. And I brought her in there, and I had a .45 automatic with a 20-shot clip on it, which you've probably never seen, and very wicked-looking weapon. And I racked the thing back, and I put it in her stomach, and I told him, you don't open that in 2 seconds, start on it, I'm going to blow her in two. He said, go ahead, she isn't mine.
Would you have?
I didn't, because he didn't open it.
But I mean, was there a moment in your head when you said, should I or shouldn't I?
No, I was just trying to we'd used every tactic we could. We'd worked him over pretty badly, and as a matter of fact, it's unfortunate, but he wound up in the sanitarium over this working over.
That's interesting. You say it's unfortunate that he wound up in a sanitarium. You mean you feel sorry for him?
Well, you say feel sorry. You couldn't help but feel sorry for the guy. I mean, we didn't want to do this, but we thought we could make him do it. But he was a stubborn German, Dutchman, whatever he was. And he just says, no, I can open it, but I'm not going to.
How much did you take out of Concordia?
Well, we took about $30,000 in cash and about $284,000 in negotiable securities, all their records. We even had a deed to the courthouse.
1932 was a good year for you, wasn't it?
It was a sort of a banner year, yes.
Was that the high point in the Karpis career?
No, not really. I'd say 1933 was.
But 32, you were still doing a lot of those country towns. Could you remember even now, all these years later, if you had to sit down and write a list of every bank you did in 1932, could you?
Well, if I took my time, yes, and kind of backtracked occasionally. And
how many could you just rhyme off the top of your head now?
Well, in 1932, I'd say maybe 11.
The pressure, the fear, the worry, did it make you panic? What would make you panic?
Well, usually the unexpected, if anybody was going to panic. Like, usually we knew that when somebody had hit a buzzer and so forth, and we were more or less prepared. So,
well, I thought you panicked in Wapaton. Tell me the whole story.
No. We were originally going to rob the bank in Wapaton and the adjoining town in Minnesota, Breckenridge. Then we figured it would be too complicated in the time element of
two banks in one day.
Yeah, at the same time, and we naturally would want to get away at the same time.
Tell me about a 10-year-old kid in Topeka who decided he was going to be a thief.
Well, that was not an unusual thing in those days because my parents were foreigners. They couldn't speak or understand English, and I could tell them about anything when I'd leave school. And I started selling papers. Well, the first thing you know, I was running errands for them pimps and gamblers and carrying booze for the bootleggers, and instead of making a cent a paper, I'd come home maybe midnight, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning with $1.50, $2 in my pocket, but I'd have much more than that. I'd hide.
Did you feel like a big shot?
Sure I did. What kid wasn't at 10 years old? Come on, I had more money than any kid in the neighborhood. So.
Were you tough too?
No, not tough. But I held my own. I used to steal, sure. I'd on the way home, like if I seen something in a store window. Don't forget they didn't have squad cars or anything like that in those days. If I seen something in the store window that appealed to me on the streets going home, I'd hide a brick or two around there on this bitty alley or the street in the first stormy night. Why, I'd just throw the brick through the window and go in there and take what it was I wanted out of there. Maybe destroy a $50 window for $3 objects and things. But
somewhere you decided on bank robbery. I think it was you said the biggest celebrities in the 20s were the bank robbers. Well, did you want to be a celebrity?
The burglars. Burglars. Well, they held a fascination for me, sure. The safe cracking part. It wasn't so much, I don't think, being a celebrity, because to be a celebrity you had to be known. You can't do that kind of business and be known without going to jail.
You were a violent man, or if you had to be, you were.
I've heard that said, yes, but I'm not trying to diminish it or evade your remarks. It's at times, yes.
You once are quoted as saying you liked a little bit of excitement. Even bank robbing could get dull.
Yes, but
is there any possibility you went into that knowing it would be exciting?
We knew it wasn't going to be dull there. December 1932, we robbed a bank in Minneapolis. And again, we knew the guy had hit the button, an alarm. Well, we already had a guy outside with a machine gun standing by a mailbox. This was a building like this where, kind of a triangle building on the corner. Well, when the squad car rolled up there, by then another fellow went out and got a machine gun out of the car to help. And when this squad car came up there, it was about 18 below, 20 below zero, and you couldn't see how many cops were in the car or anything. So so these guys just automatically opened up. And we could hear the other squad cars coming with the sirens blowing and so forth. And so these two cops never got a chance to do any shooting. We didn't know there was 2 or 4 or 5 or what. And one of these fellows that ran out there to help, in his haste and eagerness, he hit an icy place on the street and he fell. And when he fell, he was pulling the trigger and he shot down one of our back tires. We had a big Lincoln sedan. So then when we got out there, the shooting was over with, actually.
How many were dead?
Well, as it turned out, we didn't know at the time, the policemen were riddled.
What happened? You'd read about it in the paper. You'd read about it in the paper wherever you got to.
Yeah,
wherever you were
St.
hiding
Paul,
out, you'd
yeah.
read about it in the paper. Well, what did you feel when you read it?
Well, we just felt damn lucky that we didn't get slaughtered there.
Was that part of the price you paid? The police and you knew darn well that somebody was going to walk away dead or not walk away?
Well, in a big city like that, you know. On the other hand, we'd robbed a bank there for over $100,000 in cash. Nobody got hurt in the same town a few months before that.
Was there a time when you would say to yourself, I can really get killed here? When the bullets have been flying and you say, I think that's it, I'm going to stop?
I'll tell you this. When I went on that robbery, that one particular one where the cops were killed, I left all my money home, I left my jewelry home, I left all my identification, even the phony identification that I carried, because there wasn't a least bit of doubt in my mind we were going to have trouble in that place.
But not enough trouble to make you say, I think I'm going to stop.
Well, listen, I always felt like this about it. If it wasn't too rough for the other guys, I didn't think it was too rough for me.
Sounds almost like a game.
A game?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a rather serious one.
Well, sure. The more serious, the more exciting one.
But there was a lot of excitement occasionally, yes.
You liked the excitement?
After it was over with, yes. But when it's on, it's just so fast that you don't know. It's like people say, well, have you ever killed a policeman? Well, now lie. Look, when there's 4 or 5 people shooting at the police, it's hard to, perhaps I have, but it's hard to tell whose bullets actually were the lethal ones.
Well, it wouldn't have bothered you. You knew you were shooting.
Oh, listen, the only thing I was concerned about was us. Myself and the persons I was working with. No, this business is saying, well, it's too bad and this and that. All we were interested in was ourselves. I know it's a selfish way of looking at it, perhaps, from the viewpoint of a so-called society. But when I stop and think of what these mercenaries are doing today for different countries all over the world, so when you talk about the cops, you know, innocent police being killed and all this and that, well, they're not near as innocent as people that's been killed all over the world.
I know the statute of limitations never expires on murder.
This is true.
But could you guess? You ever lie in bed at night and say, I wonder how many men I've killed?
Well, sometime I've counted them up, but I'm not going to tell you. Okay?
What difference does it make?
Whether I tell you?
Yeah, how many?
Well,
you can't be prosecuted for that.
I didn't want to prosecute. Just let me put it like this. There was a few people killed in the robberies I was on. They claimed that when I was arrested, they accused me of killing 14 of them at various stages.
You would have been an accessory. Anyhow, that's just as much.
If that was it, that would have been good. I mean, I wouldn't have been so upset about these charges, but for some reason or another, they'd always say that it was me that did the shooting. I don't know why.
They want to establish you, the mad dog killer, creepy, they call you?
Yeah, that's what they call me. The cops did, that is, yeah. I held up a place with a guy, and I had already burglarized another place with a couple other fellows. The upshot of it was I got 10 years for the burglary, and that's where I met the fellows that I realized I was going to start working with. People of those guys.
Your life companions.
Yes, you might say, yeah, in the reformatory. These guys were safe blowers and hold-up guys, and one fellow in particularly, while it wasn't commonly known by the authorities, he'd already killed 3 or 4 cops. He was a dead shot. and burglaries at night.
I hear you saying this is hideous. It's the most hideous thing I think I've heard in a long time.
Well, you're asking and I'm telling you.
Yeah, but doesn't it give you a twinge when you think about it?
Well, when I think about it, I just think, well, I must have been, I wasn't all there probably. I might have had a little mental quirk about these kind of things. But as far as the killing and stuff, if Larry was to say, well, gee, it was too bad and this and that, I don't have the slightest thoughts like that about this thing. And I don't know why. Perhaps, maybe I should, because most people seem to think that I should have. But maybe my makeup isn't like that.
Does it matter to you at all what I think of you?
It would bother me not as an interviewer. I could give a damn less what you thought.
Okay, I want to talk about women, because those are the other companions. You wrote Poor Dorothy, Poor Dolores, Poor Grace.
Yeah.
They stuck by me and I loved them all.
Sure.
You loved them all, and a lot of others you didn't mention.
Yes, that's true. And
you went through women like other people go through bowls of spaghetti.
Listen, and them same broads went through guys like I did through them, so what was the difference?
What kind of women do you think they were who liked a guy like you? What kind of woman did a woman have to be for you to want her?
That I would want?
Yeah.
Well, now it's a little different, but in those days, I wanted somebody that had thoughts like myself, easy come, easy go, and too lazy to work, and just out for a good time.
You had a wife too, Dorothy.
Yes, I had.
What happened to her?
Well, in 1935, I went down and seen her in Tulsa, Oklahoma, even though I was red hot at that time, and gave her some money, and told her, I said, look, I want you to get a divorce, and I want to read it in the paper within 6 months that you got this divorce. And in those days, she could get a divorce for $1 in view of me being a fugitive. And I asked her if there's anything that she had in mind she'd like to do. She said, yes, I'd like to attend a secretarial school and learn to be a stenographer, shorthand, and so forth. So I said, okay, here's some more money for that. And,
would you like to see her today?
Would I like to see her? I don't know, I doubt it.
What about Dolores, the woman you left for her?
Yeah.
What about her, the woman who's the mother of your son?
Yeah. Well, what
also you've never seen.
What about her?
What do you think?
What do you mean I haven't seen her? Seen who?
Your son.
Oh, yes, I've seen him.
You have?
Oh, certainly. I even have grandchildren, Larry. So.
Did you reestablish contact with him?
Since I've been released, not personally, no, but I had my sister come to Chicago, up from Chicago. That's where he lives.
Do you have fatherly feelings?
Toward my son? No, I wouldn't make a very good family man. Oh, I like kids.
You said that Ma Barker was just an old-fashioned Ozark homebody. Now, everybody thought she was the brains of the Barker gang, the brains of the Karpis Barker gang, carried a machine gun. Tell me about her.
Well, the matter of fact is no one ever heard of her until after she had been slaughtered by the FBI down in Florida down in 1935. And then they built her up over the years gradually as a monster. The truth of the matter was she's an old religious, one of those holy roller religious type from the Ozarks. She never read newspapers. The only thing she listened to on the radio was hillbilly program, and her greatest pastime was working jigsaw puzzles. And as far as knowing that we were criminals, yes, she knew we were criminals.
But you were one of her boys, though, weren't you? Just the same as Doc and Freddie?
Yeah, that's right. Freddie and I, and then we got Doc out a while after we were released.
So the notorious Barker Karpis gang may have been notorious, but it wasn't her at all.
Well, according to the FBI, it was her, but in actuality, she was the type of person that didn't want to be left alone by herself after her boyfriend had met an untimely end, if I can put it that way.
You said, my friend Freddie Barker was a natural-born killer. Is that still fair? Do you still think of him that way?
Yes, I think
he was your good friend, but you knew he was just...
Oh, he was pretty rough. I don't mean he went out and shot people
for sport,
for kicks, but when the chips were down and anything came up, he was more than ready to do his part.
Tell me about the days of the gang. Perhaps the most notorious days, the days that got you branded as public enemy #1. Were those the best years, the years with the Barkers? Personally and financially?
Well, in both respects, yes.
Was that where perhaps you made most of the rumored $2.5 million that you took?
Well, we made a lot of money then, yes. We made a kidnapping. We got $100,000 for the Brewer ham. We got $200,000 6 months later for Bremer, and in between that, we got around $40,000 at the stockyards.
Kidnapping, was that a good way to make a big score then?
Well, it was the easiest way. It was the easiest way. There was less chance of any shooting or anything like that.
There was a lot of notice given. They'd know where the money was. It wasn't like a bank.
Well, it wasn't. Once you robbed a bank, you had pretty clean money. But kidnapping, they had the numbers easily.
Well, tell me about Doc Moran.
Well, there wasn't too much to tell. He was doing time in state prison in Illinois for an abortion. When he got out, he got connected with some labor racketeers. And he thought he was a plastic surgeon. And he claimed he could take people's fingerprints off. So I was interested in that, as was Freddie. So we had the operation performed by him.
Show me your fingertips. How did you do it?
Well, to begin with, he wrapped a rubber band around each finger right at the first joint to deaden them. Then he soaked them in potassium of potash, which was the best solution of disinfectant or antiseptic that they had in those days. Then when he thought they were numb enough, he injected a shot of cocaine in each finger as he operated. And then he took a scalpel and he just proceeded to sharpen the ends of my fingers like he would a pencil. And
the prints are gone, and they stayed gone.
Well, as far as I know, they have. Every time they've tried to take them, they've never been able to come up with a classification of any kind.
He also did a job on your face.
Well,
or supposed to have done it.
Yes, he did.
Story is that he was a bit of a drunk, and that brought him to an unhappy end. You may have been a party to that unhappy end.
Well, actually, if I had been, I wouldn't mind saying that I was, but it just happened I was in Cleveland when he met his untimely end.
Well, you don't have to tell me your alibi, Alvin.
I don't need an alibi for it, that son of a bitch. If it had been me, I'd be glad to say so, but it just happened I wasn't there.
A lot of people wanted him done in.
Well, he should have been done in because he was talking too much and bragging to those hookers about what all he was doing for us and who we were and one thing and another.
You must have planned to do some really big jobs in those days that you never quite got around to. Things like the Brinks. Did you, when you were in jail, did you hear about the Brinks robbery in Boston?
Oh, sure, I heard about it.
What'd you think of it?
Oh, I was a little envious in one way, but I was real tickled in another. It really pleased me to see something like that come off so nicely.
Do you get the feeling now as you sit here and tell me about it that there's a little nostalgia, just one more big score, just to see if you can do it?
No, I don't have the ambition to. No, all I want now is just do like I'm doing now, have a nice time. Every day's a holiday. Occasionally doing something like this for a diversion.
I want to talk about Chicago in the gangster days. You know, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was done by gangsters, but you're not a gangster, you're a thief.
This is true.
What's the real difference?
Well, those guys were in the rackets with the booze, the whores, the gambling, things like that, and those guys were out stealing.
Why wouldn't a guy like you, with a reputation like you had, have said, look, I'm going to cool it and go into something safer. I'm going to go to work for Capone, one of those guys. Could you have?
Well, I could have, but that wasn't, I don't know what you mean by safer. They were clay pigeons around here. There was, in the early 20s, there was 300, 400, 500 a year getting killed.
And your risk was only with the law enforcement people.
That's right.
Could you have gone to work for them?
I'm sure I could have, because one of the main characters in their execution squad was involved in the Ham kidnapping with myself, the Bremer kidnapping, and he approached me on this subject.
What about Elliot Ness?
Elliot Ness? Well, you know, with the Untouchables.
Yeah.
Well, actually, those guys were accountants, lawyers, bookkeepers, what have you. They had no authority to carry a gun. They never had any reason to carry guns. It was their job to simply dig up enough evidence through going through files, bank accounts, canceled checks, and so forth. And when they decided they had enough evidence to give to the DA, they would turn it over to him, and then it was up to him to decide whether or not he had sufficient evidence to get an indictment. And in the event the guy got indicted for the income tax, they usually just call up his house and say, hey, you know, you were indicted yesterday. And the guy would usually say, yeah, I know all about it, yeah, I know.
So they wouldn't smash the doors down with drawn guns?
Well, they didn't have any guns. They didn't even appear on the scene. They'd tell the guy, come on down to the office, bring your lawyer with you. Your bond is going to be such and such. Have the money ready, and you can go right on home.
Do you ever pay tax on the money you
Tax?
stole?
Come on. No, I never.
Didn't anybody ever ask how you were living, though? I mean, did you have a cover? Did you have a cover story, a job?
Well, a lot of people used to think, they used to ask, yes, because I usually drove around in a pretty nice car. I didn't even shave in those days, really, when I was running around doing that. So I'd always say, well, it belongs to my father. He's in the lumber business in Minnesota, or I'd say he's a wholesale grocer in Chicago, or what have you.
You didn't. It was easy to lie. I mean, you just.
Oh, well.
How old were you before you started telling the truth?
I don't think I ever have. So.
And as nearly as I can make out, you ought to be a couple of years away from 70 now.
Yes, that's right.
What about the cities that the racketeers owned, or places where you could put the fix in? Where were they?
Like St. Paul, Minneapolis.
What did you do? How much of the city did you own?
I didn't own any of it, but I could live there all I wanted to, as long as I didn't steal anything right in that town.
Do you think corruption has always been a part of American political life?
As far as I'm concerned, it always has been. Not only American. Come on, what goes on here in Canada or any place else you want to name. Spain, Portugal, Morocco, Italy, you name it, England.
You mentioned Spain, and I know that's where you live now.
Yes.
And I've lived there for 5 years.
Yes.
When you came out of jail, did you have any money?
I had $129.
Well, you must have made some money since then, or picked up something.
Well, my attorney gave me $2,000 to begin with, and then I made quite a bit of money. Yes.
How'd you make money? No.
Well, I wrote a book. I was in the pizza products business in Montreal, so I had no problem about money.
It's all clean money now.
Well, I hope so.
You mean as far as you're concerned?
Yes. Oh, it is. Yes.
You met one man who I think most people would agree is mentally unstable in prison, at least one. That's Charles Manson, before the Tate murders.
Well, he wasn't, no, I wouldn't say that he was, how did you term it? About him being unstable?
Yeah.
Well, he was this type of guy. He was probably one of the most mild and meekest sort of persons I ever met in a prison. I never knew of him to even have an argument with anyone, much less a quarrel. And he was a happy-go-lucky sort of kid. He was rather shiftless. They couldn't get him up in the morning to get him to his job unless somebody woke him up. He didn't want to shave sometime, and they'd have to threaten to shave him without any lather or anything if he didn't straighten up and fly right in that respect.
Did you really teach him to play the guitar?
No, I taught him music. He would chord and sing, but he didn't, when he would form the chords, he didn't know the notes or anything. He didn't know how to read music. So I taught him chord construction, the inversions and harmony and different things like that.
I want to get around to this, your kind of violence.
All right.
This is a Thompson, or a Tommy gun, as they call it.
Yes.
Was this your chief weapon? Was this the number one weapon for you?
Well, in the city, yes, but once we left, we usually depended on automatic rifles and so forth out in the country. If we happened to run into a posse or vigilantes and so forth.
This one is just a small clip. What is that, 20?
20, yes. Yeah. We usually...
You could spit that out in
just
about 10 seconds, eh?
Far less than that.
Where would you get these weapons? You just walk into a store and buy them?
Well, no, we had a connection in New York. We could buy all we wanted on occasion, but then other times, if we needed them, we'd just walk into a police station at night after midnight, small town, and just tell the desk sergeant we wanted the machine guns.
You'd tell them? At the point of a gun, you'd tell them?
Oh, yes.
Do you ever go out and take a few shots just to see if your eye is steady and your hand is...
Well, that's why I use them. I'm a lousy shot. I had to have something that would throw a lot of slugs out because I wasn't going to depend on a .45 automatic.
Karpis was promoted to U.S. Public Enemy #1 following the capture of John Dillinger. It wasn't until May of 1936 that Karpis was finally arrested. News reports of the time say Hoover did the job personally.
Let me talk about Hoover, finally, because that's probably the guy that sticks in your craw more than anybody else.
Not really as much as you might imagine.
Well, the story that made Hoover famous was that he personally grabbed Alvin Karpis, public enemy #1. He reached into the car and he disarmed you and grabbed you, and that made him a hero. And you say?
I say this, that 28 agents arrested me, and while even they were, well, to put it mildly, a bit excited, most of them. And one was shouting, "Put your hands up," another one, "Keep your hands down," another one, "Sit on the running board."
This was in New Orleans?
Yeah, right, about 5 in the evening. And there was a fellow behind me with the rifle, and he was so shaky that in the excitement, he wasn't scared, don't misunderstand.
You mean you could feel the barrel vibrating up against your back?
Yeah, he couldn't hold it still, so I asked the man in front of me with a machine gun. He seemed to be the coolest of the lot. I said, "Who's the boss of this outfit anyway?" And he said, "Oh, he'll be here in a minute. Why?" And I said, well, I want him to tell that guy with the rifle back at me to get it out of my back because he's so nervous. I think he's going to shoot right through me and right through you if he does shoot. And this got the guy a little upset. He heard me say that, and he said, well, you son of a bitch, when we get you to the office, I'm going to show you who the boss is. And I turned my head like that to answer him. And as I did, up at the corner of the apartment building, this was on the corner, I see a guy peeping around the corner. And I thought, what the hell is this? And when I stopped talking, these other agents that were right close to me, they started looking to see what I was looking at, why I had quit talking. And finally, here came another one around the corner, looking around the corner. One of the agents shouted, "We got him, Chief, we got him, come on, everything's all right, we got him." So here they came, and it turned out to be the Gold Dust Twins, as they were known in those days, Hoover and Clyde Tolson.
None of the FBI agents had remembered to bring handcuffs, and Karpis's wrists were bound with his own striped necktie. He was tried in Minnesota for the kidnapping of a wealthy brewer. His sentence, life.
Alcatraz couldn't break him, finally walked away free. Now he's on the outside like you and me. He lived fast and hard without a regret. Paid his dues for the kind of life that he led. Had to do what he did, the chips fell that way. He's living proof that crime don't pay. Robbing banks, payrolls, kidnappings and all. Alvin Karpis never did things small. Robbing banks, payrolls, kidnappings and all. Alvin Karpis never did things small.
He was 18 when he first went to prison in Hutchinson, Kansas. Al, that's where you met Lawrence Duvall, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What kind of a guy was he, this gunslinger?
Well, at the time I met him, I didn't realize that he was a gunslinger, but in those days, the Eli to criminals was safe blowers, and he had quite a reputation for this.
Did you get the feeling that when you got out, you were really going to be in the big time because you had Duvall with you?
Sure I did. By then I'd learned a great many more things about this fellow, that he had killed a few policemen on night capers.
Didn't that scare you, though, to be with a guy who was that turned out?
No, and to the contrary. I felt anyone that capable in that business, well, that's the guy I wanted to be with.
Did you have fantasies, though, about the big time?
Oh, about making a lot of money. And,
yeah.
Oh,
women
certainly.
in the cars.
That's right, the big Cadillacs.
What did you talk about, you and Freddie? You know, like, hey, when we get out, what's the first thing we're going to do after we get some money?
First thing we're going to do after we get some money, get a couple of girls, a nice apartment, plenty of booze.
You know, it's strange, that's what most people want, or a lot of people want, and they don't all do it robbing banks. It didn't occur to you at the time that there were other guys who got straight jobs did the same thing.
This is true, but at that time there were 12 million people unemployed in the United States, and neither one of us had a saleable trade of any kind. So I can't think of any kind of job. We could have got a legitimate job if we would have wanted it, which was the last thing in our mind.
You're most famous for having been the man who spent the most time in Alcatraz. When you were finally caught in '36, after that spree, you went to the Rock.
Yes.
Was it as awesome, as terrible, as formidable as Hollywood has led us to believe?
Well, I personally, myself, thought it was one of the greatest frauds ever put off on the American public, myself, as far as it being a place filled with murderous public enemies, as they referred to these fellas. And as a matter of fact, the first 35 numbers, they started with number 1 when they opened it in 1934. They were Army prisoners left there to kind of form a nucleus for the workforce that would eventually arrive there from the various prisons. So now, by the wildest stretch of imagination, you couldn't make them the most murderous public enemies in the United States, because they came out of the Army for various offenses, maybe spitting in the face of an officer or in the Army.
But Alcatraz did have its share of heavy
Well, they had their share, but not no more so than any other big state prison.
What did it do to you to be there? What gets you most when you're in a place like Alcatraz? Loneliness?
No, that's the least of your problems, loneliness. They had 3 screws for every 2 convicts. The thing that got to you the most at first when I went there, seemed to get to most of them, was the silence. You weren't allowed to talk in the cells or in the dining room, no place except on the yard and where you worked. And then they sent so many borderline cases there right from the start from the other institutions that should have actually went to a mental institution instead of that place.
Do you ever think you should have gone to a mental institution instead of Alcatraz?
Well, I don't know. I was stopped off at Leavenworth for 6 days on my way to Alcatraz and put through a panel of psychiatrists, and one of them came and talked to me after it was over with and told me that he was going to tell me what their findings were, but if I ever repeated it, he would deny that he said it. And he said, "You've been a kind of puzzle to us because from our findings, you're not the least bit criminally inclined."
Was there really a kind of war between you and people like you and law enforcement agencies in general?
Not really. I realized there had to be law and order. Just because I was stealing, I was in favor of law and order. Because if there hadn't been, somebody would have stolen what I had. So I had no complaint about law and order.
You spent a lot of time in isolation in Alcatraz. Why would they put you in solitary?
Oh, for various reasons, but mainly when we'd have trouble there. It looked good on paper when they'd send the reports into Washington and say, well, that SOB, he's a ringleader again.
Were you a troublemaker in Alcatraz?
Perhaps.
Well, perhaps or not. Were you or weren't you? Do you remember being the guy who started some trouble?
At times, yes. I was rather rebellious about some of their asinine rules and regulations.
Like?
Don't pass a magazine to the fellow next door to you. Don't talk in the dining room. Sit with your arms folded at the table when you're through eating. Little odds and ends like that.
You said before the elite of the criminal world was there. Do you remember some of the people like Capone?
Well, I didn't say that they were the elite, but that's what they were referred to. Well, yeah, I knew Capone quite well there. I knew Machine Gun Kelly, Harvey Bailey, Doc Barker, and a few others like that.
Were they the big shots around the prison?
There were no big shots in the prison. Not in Alcatraz.
You saw Capone just before he went pretty well out of his mind.
Well, I cell not too far from him on the same gallery. In the morning that this happened, when they opened the doors to go to breakfast, for instance, they'd blow a whistle, everyone stepped out of their cells simultaneously. The next blast of the whistle meant you move forward up the gallery toward the mess hall into the cell block. Well, this morning, he was about the 5th cell from the end going into the mess hall. And instead of moving along, he was standing out there with his coat on, his cap on. He had an old pair of work gloves in his hand. And a couple of screws. This was a second gallery, incidentally, and down on the flat, a couple of screws were looking at him. Well, as we walked by there, nobody stopped to ask him what he was doing because you would have been told immediately to move on. And I was wondering what had happened to him. He looked like he had a little dazed look in his eyes, and I noticed he was sort of dribbling out of the corner of one corner of his mouth, like a little foam-like. He was walking along there, kind of shuffling more than walking, and he started vomiting there, and 2 screws walked over and got him, and they took him on up to the hospital. And of course, there was a lot of speculation of what had happened to him. And as it turned out, he had paresis.
He was in an advanced syphilitic stage.
Very much so. They gave him several shock treatments that they almost, from what I heard, they almost knocked him off up there.
Tell me about Stroud. You met the Birdman in Leavenworth? And
well,
you were in Alcatraz.
Yes. When I first went to Leavenworth, I was held there 6 days, as I told you formerly, about the psychiatric bit. And they put me in a cell across from Stroud. The cell block was an old cell block, and it was situated in something like this, a corridor down the center and cells facing one another. Well, there was a fellow in the cell across from me, and the lights had to be on 24 hours a day in these cells, mesh screen over the barred doors. Well, it turned out that I noticed this fellow had a typewriter and a microscope on a table in his cell, which I thought very unusual. And he got up from the table and he walked toward the wall of his cell and suddenly disappeared, and I wondered what the hell's going on here. As it turned out, they had cut a doorway through one wall of his cell that led into the next one, and that is where it turned out he kept his canaries. At that time, I didn't even know that he had any. Well, I'd never heard of the fellow.
What was he like at Alcatraz?
In Alcatraz? Well, he was in isolation all the time. He was in Alcatraz till after the big blow-off in 1946. Then they put him in the hospital and kept him there. He threatened to commit suicide if they kept him in isolation any longer over there. And they would let him work in the mornings out with the yard crew cleaning up the recreation yard. The afternoons, evenings, and nights he spent in his room in the hospital.
Did you ever think in those years in Alcatraz that you'd ever get paroled?
Well, I really didn't know what to think. Sometimes you're just like everybody outside. Their hopes go up and their hopes go down. But then I discovered something that didn't make it look like I had much of a chance, and that was that every year I was eligible for parole legally in 15 years. But no one ever got a parole out of Alcatraz, the theory being that if you were so far rehabilitated along the way and risk for parole, what were you doing in Alcatraz? And they'd normally transfer you out of there under those conditions.
You got transferred when they closed it?
No, that's not right. I was transferred in April 7th, 1962, and they closed it in February of 1963.
They say when the parole board can say you're no longer a danger to society. Is that still fair to say that they can let you out, you're no danger?
Well, I don't know. They have so many reasons for turning people
When did you
out.
stop being a danger? When in your own mind did you say, if I get out tomorrow, I don't feel like robbing any more banks? Or did you?
I would say that it was 1955 was the whole start of it while I was in Alcatraz.
If you had to rob a bank again today, Alvin, would it still be exciting the way it was?
Well, I'd probably be frightened to death right now, I think. I don't think it'd be a matter of excitement. It'd be a matter of nervousness.
Was it a good life?
Sure, it was a good life.
Even with Alcatraz and all
Everything included. Listen, I wouldn't trade it for $1 million.
Funny thing, I got no use for a bank robber, a thief, man who uses guns, but Alvin Karpis, you've got me fooled.
Well, maybe that was my business to do it. No, not really. It was been a pleasure working with you.
You stay out of trouble.
I'm going to hope to. Yes, all right.
Do what he did, the chips fell that way. He's living proof that crime don't pay. Robbing banks, payrolls, kidnappings, and all. Alvin Karpis never did things small. Robbing banks, payrolls, kidnappings, and all. Alvin Karpis never did things small.